What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to America's Finest Sports. It's Monday. Matt and I are here. I don't know. We still call it M&M Monday, but overall, we are talking about a lot of different NFL topics going on. You know, if you don't know America's Finest Sports, we cover all sports, but Monday we like to talk about the NFL. And we got a lot of good topics to talk about. You know, we're going to start off talking about, the Super Bowl hangover, talk about the Rams, then we'll get into the Cincinnati Bengals. Then we've got a really fun topic talking about the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. Matt and I each have our own list. We will debate them. We will go over them. Should be a lot of fun. And then finally, we'll be talking about a team that we are both very excited to watch in the AFC West, which is the Denver Broncos, and really talking about how far, those two defensive superstars can lead them in Justin Simmons and Mr. Patrick Surtain II. But Matt, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Rams, the reigning Super Bowl champions. Is there any chance, or what are you thinking about the potential for a Super Bowl hangover from the champs?
So I think the first thing that you need to address is they're very susceptible to injury. And then I think the second thing you need to address is if they don't get hurt, they're probably your NFC favorite. Like, they are that good. They are legit. The only thing is that if one of their star players gets hurt, they could easily go down. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. We talked about it. We talked about Matthew Stafford, but I also don't think a lot of people talk about if Jalen Ramsey or Aaron Donald were to go down, like, the Rams defense would be a nightmare mode. So if one of their tackles go down, they don't really have a lot of tackle depth either. So, like, that's the only concern I have for the Rams in terms of talent, in terms of, are they the best team in the NFC West? I think they are. Are they the best team in the NFC? I think they are. I think them and the Buccaneers are like the two teams that are right at the top. I think the Niners are pretty good. I don't think that, it's Trey Lance's first year starting, so I think that's a lot of pressure there. If we look around, Cowboys, Eagles, I don't think they're quite that caliber of team. And then in the North, I think the Vikings, they're good, but I don't think they're that level, kind of similar, to the Cowboys and Eagles. And then the Packers have really lost a lot of their roster over the past couple of years. And yes, they have Aaron Rodgers still, so of course they're going to be in the mix. They're probably going to be a playoff team, but I still think that the Rams are the best team in the NFC. So in terms of Super Bowl hangover, of course it could happen. It's very, very rare that a team is able to return to the Super Bowl after they were in it the year before. But, I mean, I still think they're the top dogs in the NFC.
Yeah, when I'm looking at them and I'm looking at the NFC, that's the benefit that they have, because a lot of times in recent years it's been, oh yeah, this team was able to win the Super Bowl, and then you look at it and they're like, okay, what conference are they playing in? And maybe this team was an AFC champion, and then you're like, oh, who do they have to go against? They're like, oh, they got to get past Brady, or they got to get past, the Pittsburgh Steelers, or maybe it was Peyton Manning on whatever team he was playing on. There's a lot of really difficult teams to get by. In the NFC, like you said, Matt, there are a lot of kind of bad teams. And looking at their schedule, they do have some tough opponents. Obviously, they play against the Bills early. That's a very difficult game. Very excited for that one. But they also get to play the Falcons. They get to play against the Dallas Cowboys, which I know they're not a bad team, but I think they match up pretty well against the Cowboys. They get the Seahawks twice. They also get the Arizona Cardinals, in the second half of the season. And if you don't know, the Arizona Cardinals in the first half or second half, very different teams. So, like, when I'm looking at them, yes, Matt, I completely agree that, if the injury bug is to hit, they would be completely destroyed. They're not a super deep team. They are very star driven, which when healthy, that means that you are going to be very elite at what you do. But if something even if it's like you said, oh, they get hurt at tackle, it's like, oh man, okay. If they get hurt at wide receiver, okay, you lose Cooper Kupp, that's going to be really tough to make up for. Even like if they lost Allen Robinson, like that's going to make up a lot of their team. So overall, I don't think that this is a team that's, poised for a Super Bowl hangover. Now, is there a good chance that they don't make the Super Bowl? Yes, but that's just because it's very difficult to repeat as going to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, this is going to be a team that's in contention. It will not be, because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, they made the playoffs after winning the Super Bowl, but they're nowhere near as good as they were, so they get bounced kind of early. This is borderline the same team that they had last season. You swap out Odell, you get yourself a Allen Robinson. So obviously there's a change right there. You lose your, your number 2 cornerback, but you got all the main pieces, right? You got Donald, Ramsey, Stafford, Sean McVay, and Cam Akers, who came back last year, was he was solid for them, and they still have Darrell Henderson, and so overall, like this is a really good roster. The division's not as good as it used to be. I think the division has gotten worse, especially with the DeAndre Hopkins suspension. So like it's not a team that I'm looking at as like, oh, it could be difficult, because I think they should very easily make the playoffs. They could be the number one seed in the West, or sorry, in the NFC, also in the West as well. So like they could even be getting a bye week in this postseason. And if you get a bye week in the postseason, you're a contender. So like I think Super Bowl hangover is, are they still a contender at the end of the year? I definitely think they will be, as long as they're able to stay healthy. So, I'm not concerned whatsoever about the Rams. I think they've been one of the best teams in the NFL for a few years now. And it showed last year, and if they stay healthy, it'll show again, especially in such a weak conference like the NFC.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. And I think that, this is a team that's super stacked. They have an elite quarterback, or if he's not elite, he's really close to elite. So either way you want to put it. Now there are some question marks in terms of like, Donald almost retired. He's getting older. But like, I still expect Aaron Donald to be Aaron Donald. I'm not expecting a drop off from him. The only thing that I'm like really concerned about is Stafford's health and the offensive line, because the offensive line isn't that good. You mentioned a couple of guys they lost. They also lost Whitworth as well. And I know Whitworth was not as good last season as he had been in prior years. But you still have some change up in the offensive line, and they have a bad offensive line. Like they're going to be decently effective running the football, just because they have a great coach in Sean McVay. But this is one where, if I'm looking at it, like this is a Matthew Stafford driven offense where they're going to need the Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp connection to be really good. Matthew Stafford to Allen Robinson could also be a really, really underrated connection this year, because the number 2 wide receiver for the Rams plays a very important role, and he usually puts up a lot of numbers, right? Like, look at who's been there, man. Like, you've had a lot of great players. You saw the Odell trade last year after Robert Woods was injured. And now Allen Robinson is going to slide into that number 2 spot. So he's going to have a big year too, especially after, I would say, a couple down years in Chicago. Maybe it's only really last year, but I feel like, I think it was 2019 was probably his best season in the NFL. So a couple years removed from his best season, but he could definitely have a resurgence. Defensively, depth, that's the only concern there. But to be honest, like this is a team that hasn't had first round picks, and they've been able to use their mid and late round picks to consistently just keep the defense pretty good. It feels like almost every time. So I have a lot of faith in the Rams to be able to bounce back, like not bounce back, but to come back and maybe even be in the Super Bowl again. Like I think I think it's almost like Super Bowl or bust for them. So
they also added a great leader in Bobby Wagner, which we haven't.
We haven't brought up Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, definitely. They should definitely be back there. I mean, just the star, like again, they're so star, forward that it's just like, okay, even if they're struggling overall, those stars are going to win them enough games. Aaron Donald is going to take over in at least 3 games this season and win them by himself. Jalen Ramsey is going to win them a game by himself by just completely shutting down an offensive superstar at wide receiver. Oh, and then Cooper Kupp is going to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 games this year where it's just like, 9 receptions, 170 yards, and 2 touchdowns, which is like, you're going to win the game if your receiver is doing that on a consistent basis. So overall, they're going to have the wins. To be able to get out there. They're not a team anyone wants to play against. Nobody wants to try and block Aaron Donald. Nobody wants to run a route against Jalen Ramsey. And no one wants to try and cover, anybody in any route in a Sean McVay offense. It's just very difficult to do. So because of that, I don't think they're, a potential culprit.